Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel Frontline News. Today we are diving deep into a topic that's sending shockwaves through Moscow and beyond. Putin's control of Russia, once thought to be absolute and unshakable, is starting to slip. The signs are everywhere, and the Kremlin can no longer hide what's really happening inside its walls. This is not the Russia of the early 2000s. Where everything revolved around one man's image of power and control. This is a Russia facing cracks in the foundation, cracks that no amount of propaganda or intimidation can fully conceal anymore. For more than 2 decades, Vladimir Putin has ruled Russia with an iron fist. His image as a strong leader, a man who could restore stability after the chaos of the 1990s, defined modern Russian politics. But that image is fading fast. The war in Ukraine, once meant to showcase Russia's strength and unity, has instead exposed its weaknesses and divisions. The economy is strained, the elites are anxious, and ordinary Russians are beginning to question the promises they've been fed for years. The illusion of total control is slipping, and the Kremlin's desperate attempts to maintain it only make the cracks more visible. In the early years, Putin's power was built on a grand deal between the state and the people. The message was simple: stay out of politics, and you'll have stability, jobs, and pride in a strong Russia. For a while that worked. The economy grew, oil money flowed, and Putin's approval ratings soared. But that old deal has broken down. The invasion of Ukraine has turned into a long, grinding conflict with no clear victory in sight. Sanctions have crippled parts of the economy, and thousands of young Russians have fled the country to avoid the draft. The myth of Putin's invincibility has been shattered, and Russians are starting to see their leader not as a symbol of stability, but as the source of chaos. Inside the Kremlin, fear and distrust are growing. The system Putin built depends entirely on loyalty to him, not institutions. That means everyone around him is terrified of making a wrong move. Generals, ministers, and regional governors are walking on eggshells, afraid to deliver bad news or admit mistakes. This fear has created paralysis. Decisions are delayed, corruption festers, and incompetence goes unpunished. When a system depends on one man's control, it's only as strong as his ability to manage it, and Putin's grip is weakening. The Wagner rebellion earlier this year was the clearest sign yet that something is deeply wrong. A private army, led by Yevgeny Prigozhin, marched toward Moscow with little resistance. For hours, the world watched as Russia's military and security forces stood by, unsure of what to do. That rebellion may have been crushed, but the message it sent was unmistakable. Putin's power is no longer unquestioned. Even inside his own ranks, there are factions ready to challenge him when the opportunity arises. The fear that once kept everyone in line is no longer absolute. Propaganda has always been the Kremlin's strongest weapon. Russian state media has spent years shaping reality, telling citizens that everything is under control, that Russia is winning, that Putin is the protector of the nation. But even propaganda has its limits. Social media, independent journalists abroad, and soldiers returning from the front are spreading stories the state can't fully suppress. Russians are hearing about heavy losses, poor equipment, and corruption in the military. The truth, once hidden behind the wall of state television, is slipping through the cracks. When people stop believing what they are told, control becomes impossible to maintain. Economically, Russia is under immense pressure. Sanctions have cut off access to Western markets and technology. Inflation is high, and the ruble has lost value. The government has turned to China, India, and Iran to fill the gaps, but these partnerships are based on necessity, not strength. The economy has become dependent on selling energy at discounted prices, while key industries are struggling to survive without Western parts or investment. For ordinary Russians, life is getting harder. Prices are up, opportunities are shrinking, and even the middle class feels the pain. When people's daily lives deteriorate, no amount of propaganda can cover the truth. Behind the scenes, the Russian elite is growing restless. The oligarchs who once benefited from Putin's system now face sanctions, asset freezes, and isolation from the West. Their lavish lifestyles are gone, and their businesses are collapsing. Many of them no longer believe in Putin's ability to protect their interests. Some whisper about alternatives. Others quietly move their families and money abroad. In a system built on loyalty and fear, even a small loss of confidence among the elite can be fatal. The one's united power structure now looks fragile and divided. The military situation is another factor eroding Putin's image. The invasion of Ukraine was meant to be quick and decisive, but it turned into a long and bloody war. Russian forces have suffered massive losses, both in soldiers and equipment. Reports of poor planning, corruption, and infighting between commanders have become common. Putin tried to frame the war as a patriotic mission to defend Russia from NATO and Western aggression, but that narrative is collapsing. Many Russians are tired of sending their sons to fight a war that makes no sense to them. Even within the army, morale is low, and loyalty to the Kremlin is not guaranteed. Putin's control has always depended on projecting strength. Every photo, every speech, every public appearance was designed to show dominance and confidence. But lately, that image is faltering. He avoids unscripted meetings. His public events are tightly controlled. Rumors about his health and paranoia circulate constantly. His isolation during the pandemic and since the start of the war has deepened the impression that he's out of touch with reality. A leader who once seemed invincible now appears vulnerable, surrounded by yes-men and shielded from the truth. Meanwhile, the Russian public is becoming more cynical. Decades of lies, corruption, and broken promises have left people skeptical of everything the government says. Even those who once supported Putin now speak cautiously in private about the future. The older generation who grew up seeing him as a stabilizing force are confused by the chaos. The younger generation who access information online are increasingly disillusioned. This generational shift is critical. The youth no longer fear the Kremlin the way their parents did. Many have already left Russia to seek a different life, and those who stay are questioning the system openly. In the regions, local leaders are facing growing challenges. Moscow's grip on the far corners of Russia has always depended on money and intimidation. But as resources dry up and Moscow's attention stays fixed on Ukraine, regional governors are forced to handle crises on their own. Some are quietly asserting more independence, focusing on local issues rather than the Kremlin's political agenda. This slow decentralization may not seem dramatic, but it's a sign that Putin's vertical power structure is weakening from within. Even within the security apparatus, doubts are rising. The FSB, the military, and the police, Putin's core pillars of control, are not immune to the country's internal decay. Officers are frustrated with corruption, lack of direction, and the endless war. Some high-ranking figures have disappeared, arrested, or sidelined after losing internal battles. The loyalty that once defined Russia's power institutions is now mixed with fear and suspicion. Everyone is watching everyone else, and no one feels truly safe. Internationally, Russia's isolation is another blow to Putin's authority. Once he positioned himself as a global power player, meeting world leaders and shaping international events. Now he's cut off from most of the developed world. His closest allies are authoritarian regimes that see Russia more as a tool than a partner. Even China, despite public friendship, keeps a careful distance. Putin's attempt to rebuild a sphere of influence has backfired, leaving Russia more dependent and less respected than ever. As pressure mounts, the Kremlin's tactics are becoming more desperate. Laws are tightening, censorship is increasing, and dissent is crushed harder than before. But history shows that repression has limits. The more the state tightens control, the more resentment grows beneath the surface. People learn to adapt, to resist quietly, and eventually the fear that once kept everyone silent begins to fade. That's already happening in Russia today. Small acts of defiance, graffiti leaks, quiet protests are spreading. It's not a revolution yet, but it's the beginning of something the Kremlin cannot fully contain. The coming years will be crucial. Putin's system is built on inertia, on the belief that nothing can change. But once people realize that change is possible, the entire structure can unravel quickly. The Kremlin can't hide forever behind propaganda and fear. The world is watching, and so are the Russian people. The illusion of control has been broken. Putin may still hold power on paper, but real control, the ability to shape the future, to inspire loyalty, to command trust, is slipping away. The question now is not if Putin's grip will weaken further, but how fast. The forces he unleashed, nationalism, militarism, repression, are turning against him. Every failed promise, every loss on the battlefield, every act of cruelty fuels the cycle of decline. Power in Russia has always been a fragile thing, held together by perception and fear. When those fade, collapse can come suddenly and without warning. History has shown that even the strongest rulers can fall when the facade of control crumbles. Right now, the Kremlin still insists everything is fine. State media continues to show Putin as calm, confident, and in command. But behind that image lies panic, uncertainty, and disarray. The longer the war drags on, the harder it becomes to sustain the illusion. Every news scandal, every sign of dissent, every economic setback chips away at the foundation of power. Russia is entering a period of instability, and no one, not even Putin himself, can predict how it will end. In the end, Putin's downfall may not come through a dramatic revolution or coup. It may come quietly through the erosion of loyalty, the decay of institutions, and the loss of belief in his leadership. Power doesn't disappear overnight. It fades, slowly at first, then all at once. The world is witnessing that process unfold in real time. Putin's control of Russia is slipping, and no matter how tightly he tries to hold on, the cracks are too deep to repair. The Kremlin can no longer hide what's happening. The truth is seeping out through every part of Russian society, through whispers, rumors, and growing discontent. For 2 decades, Putin ruled through fear and control, but those tools are losing their effectiveness. The mask of invincibility is gone. What remains is a leader surrounded by fear, presiding over a nation that's beginning to question his authority. The age of Putin's absolute control is ending, and a new, uncertain chapter for Russia is beginning. This is the story of power in decline. It's the story of a system built on one man's image now collapsing under its own weight. The Kremlin may still project strength, but behind the scenes it's a different reality, one of confusion, mistrust, and quiet rebellion. History will remember this moment as the beginning of the end of Putin's era. Whether it happens in months or years, the direction is clear. The cracks have become too wide, and no amount of denial can hide them anymore.